James Alfred White, better known by his pen name James Herriot, was a British veterinary surgeon and an author. Wright graduated in 1939, returning to England to become a veterinary surgeon in Yorkshire, where he practiced for almost 50 years. Although White claimed that he had begun to write only after his wife encouraged him at the age 50, he in fact kept copious diaries as a child. As a teenager, wrote for his school's magazine and wrote at least one short story during his college years. The moral of the chapter is that anything in excess is not good for us. Even food, if given more than it is required, will harm the body. But if, in time, you come into a proper routine, that problem can be resolved without any surgery.
James Herriot, a veterinary doctor, narrated the story of Tricky and the dog and how he gets better. He saw Tricky one day with his owner, Mrs. Pumphrey. James was shocked to see Tricky's appearance, and he was seriously overweight and had bloodshot eyes. Mrs. Pumphrey quickly explained that she thought Tricky was suffering from malnutrition, so she fed him some Malcod olive oil and a bowl of Horlicks. She also confessed that she fed him some cream cakes and chocolate.
James realized that the situation was bad. He knew Tricky could never say no to food, so he gave some stern advice to the lady. However, he watched Mrs. Pumphrey walk away with Tricky. He thought it wouldn't be long before he heard from. Sure enough, Mrs. Pumphrey called a few days later. It seemed Tricky was refusing food and was suffering from bouts of vomiting. James had already made a plan by then. He knew that the only way to cure Tricky was to take away him to the clinic. So he came to Mrs. Pumphrey's house and suggested that the Tricky be removed to his clinic for a few weeks.
Pumphrey almost fainted at the suggestion, but the narrator was firm, grabbing hold of Tricky. James carried him down to his car. The whole household was in an uproar. The staff rushed about getting blankets, bowls, clothes, and toys for Tricky. The narrator, realizing the items would not fit in his car, and quickly drove away. From his rearview mirror, he saw the entire household standing on the road in tears at his clinic. His dog just stared at them with dull eyes. In contrast, Tricky was given only water and no food. At the end of the second day, Tricky started showing some interest in his surroundings. On the third day, the narrator led Tricky to the dogs playing in the yard.
Tilly slowly followed the dog around as they played. Later, after the dogs were fed, Tricky snuffed their ball, licking them casually. The next day, when the ball was set from them, Tricky joined the other dogs for a meal. That was the turning point for Tricky. From then on, he made rapid progress fighting them for food and hunting rats at night. On hearing that, Mr. Pumphrey started bringing around baskets of egg. Then she started sending wine's lunch became a fun affair with glasses of wine before and during the meal. Finally, she sent a bottle of brandy.
James was tempted to keep Tricky. James and his partner reverently enjoyed this dinner and drink, permanently if only the fine spirits and the eggs. But he knew that Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, so he called her and gave her the good news within minutes. Mrs. Pumphrey arrived at the clinic. There was a marked change in Tricky. No longer he was a fat bloated animal, and now he was agile and well muscled, and kept up with James' dog. James carried Tricky back to Mrs. Pumphrey. He jumped out of James up, and Pumphrey scared the minute Tricky saw his rushed at Mrs. Pumphrey. She tried to offend herself as Tricky barked and licked her face. Mrs. Pumphrey, with tearful eyes, thanked James. She believed it was triumph of surgery.